What's up everyone, I'm Tim. This is my channel 40 Times Around, where we talk about everything related to motorcycles, camping, traveling, and adventure. And today we're going to talk about how to choose a tent for your next motorcycle camping trip. We're going to talk about all the different features that are available, what you should be looking for, and what you should be avoiding. So stick around. All right, so we're going to talk about choosing a tent for your next motorcycle camping trip. Now, there's a lot of features to consider. There's endless amounts of tents available to you, and I'm going to try to help you guys narrow down the ones that are best for motorcycle camping, in my opinion, the features that matter the most. Let's just kind of go through all the different factors about a tent that you could be considering. And we'll start with season rating. You have three options with season rating. You have a 3-season tent, you have a 3 to 4 season tent, and then you have the 4-season tent. Now the 3-season tent, in my opinion, is really where you want to be aiming. This is going to cover you basically spring, summer, and fall. Typically you're not out riding your motorcycle around in the winter, and even if you are, probably not going to be camping in that situation. So 3-season really gets you covered. If you know you're going to places, high altitude, there may be potential for wintry conditions. You may want to consider a 3 to 4 season. However, the 4-season, it's a little bit overkill. It's more for mountaineering. Super heavy duty fabric, just kind of unnecessary. They're going to be really heavy, really bulky, typically with more poles, less mesh panels, which means that they're just going to be heavier. Now, the 3 to 4 season falls somewhere in the middle of those two as far as weight, mesh panels, things like that. Also, if you're going to be camping in warmer weather, you're going to want the 3-season, so you do have more mesh panels. You get a little more cross ventilation that way. So with this 3-season tent, it is definitely going to keep you, protected from bugs. It's going to keep you, dry in the rain, things like that. So it's really a solid choice. I really don't think you need much more than that for motorcycle camping. Now the next factor for you to consider is tent style. I think this is a total no-brainer, but let's just go over the options real quick. The first one I think we can just totally check right off the list is the cabin style. This is going to be the type that has just vertical straight walls and kind of a peaked roof. So they're really tall. They're great for standing up in. Typically they have big windows so you get a good view. Unfortunately, they're not great in the wind or any kind of adverse weather. They're also a lot bigger. And I kind of think these are more for car camping, to be honest with you. It's more of a luxury, it's very roomy. Another option that you have is the lean-to style or an A-frame. Now, I've camped with these before, and to be honest with you, they just don't work for me. And the reason for that is I need something freestanding. I have found myself in places, particularly in the desert, where the ground is so hard you can't get a stake in it. So if you have a tent that relies on stakes in the ground to stand up, you're going to get yourself into trouble with that. So I kind of avoid the A-frames, the lean-tos. The other style is the hoop style. These are super lightweight. They're great in wind. They're really low to the ground typically. It's almost like a coffin style, really, really small. The problem with these is it's kind of a hybrid of the freestanding and needing stakes to at least pull up one half of it. So these aren't really a great option either, as tempting as it may be, because they'll pack so small for the size of tent that they actually are. And my favorite would be the dome style, which are these two here that you see behind me. These are completely freestanding. They pack reasonably small. I just think this is kind of the perfect style for motorcycle camping. With the dome style, you're gonna get great wind protection. They withstand heavy winds pretty well, a lot better than the cabin style. They're a lot more sloped. They do give you some headroom in the middle, but they kind of pitch down. Real quick on why I like the dome style so much and the freestanding aspect of it is that once you've set it up, you may crawl in there and see, oh man, you're just on a slope, you're on a hill that you didn't notice until you got inside it. Well, it's really easy to just pick them up and move them. They're completely freestanding. Now, another thing I like to do with these in the morning is I'll actually just pick it up when it's all empty and I'll shake it out. I'll get all the dust and dirt out. Keeps it nice and clean. So it's nice to have a freestanding one that you have that ability. Now these do pack a little bigger than some of the other options, but I think it's totally worth it. I mean, you're on a motorcycle, you're not backpacking, so you can afford a little extra bulk and a little extra weight to be in something that I think just offers so much more simplicity, ease of setup, just all around is a better tent. Okay, so the next factor that you're gonna wanna weigh in is zippers. Now you wanna make sure that it has what's called a YKK zipper, and that just means it's not gonna snag. Just check the ease of the zipper. It's nice and smooth. It doesn't feel like it's gonna be kind of cheap and snag eventually. You also wanna consider the number of doors. Now, especially if you're in the tent with somebody else and someone has to get up in the middle of the night, it's great that you have your own door and nobody has to crawl over somebody else. in the tent in the middle of the night. If you're like me and you're always looking to shed weight on what you're carrying on your motorcycle, this is probably not a great area to be looking. You probably, most likely, will not find anything suitable for motorcycle camping that weighs less than 2 pounds. I have just scoured the internet looking, and take my word for it, few and far between, unless you're spending upwards of $1,000, which I don't recommend. So you're looking at about 2.5 pounds. Certain things will definitely increase that weight. Now, in terms of pack size, which is obviously important on a motorcycle, you're looking at typically somewhere between 18 to 24 inches long and about 4 to 7 inches wide for pack size. Now, one trick that I'll use is, because the poles are kind of the deciding factor on how big this packs to, I'll actually pack the poles separately. I don't mind just strapping those to the top of the bike, because if they get wet, it's kind of irrelevant. But I don't want the fabric part of the tent getting wet, and it packs a lot smaller if I'm just working with the fabric, and I can just roll it up into a ball, pack it in my side cases somewhere, and it takes up much less space than having it rolled up with the poles included. Another factor you want to think about is, what size tent do you want? This is my old tent that I used to use a lot. This is a 1-person tent. Honestly, it's not big enough. It's not big enough for me because when I sleep at night, I like to have my jacket in the tent with me, nice and dry. I put my helmet in there, some clothes and stuff. I end up with just things inside the tent, and all of a sudden a 1-person tent becomes a half-person tent. Even solo camping, alone in my tent, I would prefer to take a 2-person tent. Kind of what I'm getting at is, if it's a 2-person tent, that means it's really a 1-person tent. A 3-person tent is really a 2-person tent. Especially, you know, if you're out camping and you happen to get stuck in your tent because it's raining, you want a little room to just move around and be comfortable. You don't want to feel so stifled. Now, another thing you want to think about is your rain fly. This is basically the fabric piece that goes over the tent, separate of the actual structure. And what this is going to do is, it's going to offer moisture protection from dew and condensation, also rain protection, and on cold nights it's going to offer a little bit of warmth retention. Now, there's a few styles of rain flies. There are roof only style, which if you know it's going to be warm weather, you know it's going to not be raining, these are great. However, typically that's not the case, and we can never really plan the weather so accurately. So I wouldn't really recommend going with a roof only style, and I would go with the full coverage, because you're guaranteed it's going to be protected if it's raining, you're not going to get condensation inside the tent, and it's going to be nice and warm on cold nights. Now, I've actually also just used the tent without a rain fly at all if I know it's not going to be raining, I know it's not going to be cold, so you kind of have the option of roof only, even if you have the full coverage one, by just removing it. Now, what's important with this is that the rain fly is over these poles, because what will happen is it'll allow airflow between the rain fly and the tent. This way you don't trap air in, you don't get condensation. Now, if you're looking at tents and you're looking at the statistics on it or the ratings on it, you want to look for higher denier fabrics. These are going to be more rugged, more durable. Especially you want to look for this on the floor of the tent. Another thing about the floor of the tent is that you want to look for the bathtub style. In other words, there's no seam down here. The seam is a couple inches off of the ground. This way, if it does rain, there's no weak point for water to get in. Now, another thing with those seams is that you want to make sure that these seams are taped. In other words, after it's sewn, it's actually taped on too. It just keeps it from being a weak point. Now, something that I found through a lot of trial and error, because I've been through quite a few tents and just trying different things and seeing what works for me, something I found to be hugely valuable on a motorcycle camping trip is having a big vestibule, and possibly even one on each side. Now, the vestibule is basically, if you consider the tent like your home, this is like your garage. Obviously, your bike's not going to fit in here unless you go with one of those crazy, you know, Red Ver's motorcycle camping tents, which I think is outrageous and ridiculous. But in terms of, you know, your boots, or, you know, just some gear that you want out of the rain, out of the elements, but you don't want to have it in your tent with you, this is a perfect place to keep those kind of things. I use it in the morning too when I get up, before I get completely out of my tent. It's like just having a little extra room where I'm still covered. So a vestibule is really very important in my opinion. Now, this tent here I actually stopped using because the vestibule wasn't big enough, and it only comes out on one side, whereas this one here actually comes out on both sides and gives me plenty of extra space. Now, another thing you really want to consider is airflow of the tent. Now, this is particularly important where I live in Arizona, where if I'm camping out in the desert in the summer, it gets so hot. even at midnight, it's still hot. So airflow is so important. And where that's gonna come from is these large mesh panels. As you can see on this one, it's almost entirely mesh panel. The airflow on this thing is just unbelievable. And that's why a lot of times I won't even put the rain fly on, just to get that extra breeze going through at night. Now another thing, if you find yourself, going to really extreme climates, this is kind of an optional thing, but I did want to mention it, is to look for guy out loops. And these are typically something you would find on a higher end tent. Guy out loops are basically little loops on the outside of the tent that you can use to kind of batten down the hatches, just really bolt down and secure the tent with ropes, rocks, whatever. And if you're in a really windy environment, maybe at the top of a mountain or something, these are gonna come in super handy, keep your tent from blowing over at night. If you're investing a lot of money in a tent, you wanna make sure that you're protecting that investment. And the best way to do that is with a tarp on the ground. Now you can go with a footprint, they're typically more expensive. I found you can save a few bucks just using a regular tarp, which can be picked up at Walmart for less than 10 bucks. And they're super durable. Basically what this does is it just protects the bottom of your tent from rocks and sticks and dirt and just the abuse of just being on the ground, which is not always so hospitable. Now, another thing too you might want to consider packing with you, and I'm actually going to get into this in a future video, but that's a tent repair kit. Basically, if one of your poles breaks, it's a little sleeve that will repair it. It's like a coupling. Or, you can patch holes in the tent with a tent repair kit. So that's something I'm going to cover in a future video, but consider taking one of those with you. So now another thing we should really talk about here is tent stakes. Typically, no matter how expensive the tent is, the stakes that come with it, they're just not that great. This is just a normal tent stake that came with one of my tents. It bends pretty easy, pretty quick. So what I'll do is I'll just invest in some heavier duty tent stakes. These things have never bent on me. They actually have 3 sides, which just makes it a lot more secure. Even pounding this in with a rock or a hammer, I haven't bent one of these yet, so I highly recommend that you invest in some heavier duty stakes for your tent. All right, so that wraps it up. Those are the things you should be considering when you're choosing a tent for motorcycle camping. Hopefully you guys got something out of this video. If you did, make sure you hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you guys haven't already. And thanks for watching. See you next time.